The Light Tank M24 is an American light tank used during the latter part of World War II and in post-war conflicts including the Korean War and, with the French, in the war in Algeria and the First Indochina War. In British service it was given the service name Chaffee, after the United States Army General Adna R.Chaffee, Jr., who helped develop the use of tanks in the United States Armed Forces. While long removed from American and British service, it is still found in service as a light tank in Third World countries, along with other hardware from that era. Development and production history. British combat experience in the North African campaign identified several shortcomings of the M3 Stuart light tank, especially the performance of its 37mm cannon. A 75mm gun was experimentally fitted to an M8 howitzer motor carriage, an M3 tank with a larger turret, and trials indicated that a 75mm gun on the M5 light tank development of the M3 was possible. The M3-M5 design was dated, though the 75mm gun reduced storage space, and the armor was insufficient. The T7 light tank design, which was initially seen as a replacement, grew in weight to more than 25 short tons, taking it out of the light tank classification, and so was designated as the medium tank M7. The weight increase without increased power gave it unsatisfactory performance. The program was stopped in March 1943 to allow standardization on a single medium tank, the M4 medium. This prompted the Ordnance Committee to issue a specification for a new light tank with the same powertrain as the M5A1 but armed with a 75mm gun. In April 1943, the Ordnance Corps, together with Cadillac, started work on the new project, designated Light Tank T24. The power plant and transmission of the M5 was used together with some aspects of the T7. Every effort was made to keep the weight of the vehicle under 20 tons. The armor was kept light, with the glacis plate only 25mm thick but sloped to maximize effectiveness. A new lightweight 75mm gun was developed, a derivative of the gun used in the B-25H missile bomber. The gun had the same ballistics as the 75mm M3 in use by American tanks, but used a thinly walled barrel and different recoil mechanism. The design featured 16-inch tracks and torsion bar suspension, similar to the slightly earlier M18 Hellcat tank destroyer. The torsion bar system was to give a smoother ride than the vertical volute suspension used on most U.S. armored vehicles. At the same time, the chassis was expected to be a standard used for other vehicles, such as self-propelled guns, and specialist vehicles, known together as the Light Combat Team. It had a relatively low silhouette on a three-man turret. On October 15, 1943, the first pilot vehicle was delivered. The design was judged a success and a contract for 1,000 was immediately raised by the Ordnance Department. This was subsequently increased to 5,000. Production began in 1944 under the designation Light Tank M24. It was produced at two sites, from April at Cadillac and from July at Massey Harris. By the time production was stopped in August 1945, 4,731 M24s had left the assembly lines. 289 M24s were supplied to British forces under Lend-Lease, and 2 to the Soviet Union. Combat history. The M24 Chaffee was intended to replace the aging and obsolete light tank M5, which was used in supplementary roles. The first 34 M24s reached Europe in November 1944 and were issued to the U.S. 2nd Cavalry Group in France. These were then issued to Troop F, 2nd Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron, and Troop F, 42nd Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron. which each received 17 M24s. During the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944, these units and the new tanks were rushed to the southern sector. 2 of the M24s were detached to serve with the 740th Tank Battalion of the U.S. First Army. The M24 started to enter widespread issue in December 1944, but they were slow in reaching the front-line combat units. By the end of the war, many armored divisions were still mainly equipped with the M3, M5 Stuart. Some armored divisions did not receive the first M24s until the war was over. Reports from the armored divisions that received them prior to the end of hostilities were generally positive. Crews liked the improved off-road performance and reliability, but were most appreciative of the 75mm main gun, which was a vast improvement over the 37mm. The M24 was not up to the challenge of fighting German tanks, but the bigger gun at least gave its crews a much better chance to fight back when it was required. The M24's light armor made it vulnerable to virtually all German tanks, anti-tank guns, and handheld anti-tank weapons. The contribution of the M24 to winning the war in Europe was insignificant, as too few arrived too late to replace the worn-out M5s of the armored divisions. In the Korean War, M24s were the initial U.S. tanks directed to combat the North Korean T-34-85s. The occupation troops in Japan from which the tanks were drawn were inexperienced and under-equipped due to rapid demobilization after World War II. The M24 fared poorly against these better armed, better armored, and better crewed medium tanks, losing most of the number while inflicting only minor damage on the T-34 units. Managing a fighting withdrawal, they ended up as artillery in the Pusan perimeter. In August, reinforcements from the US and the Commonwealth brought heavier tanks that could easily dispatch the T-34s. M24s were more successful later in the war in the reconnaissance role, supported by heavier, more capable tanks such as the M4 Sherman, M26 Pershing, and M46 Patton. Like other successful World War II designs, the M24 was supplied to many armies around the globe and was used in local conflicts long after it had been replaced in the U.S. Army by the M41 Walker Bulldog. France employed its M24s in Indochina in infantry support missions, with good results. They employed 10 M24s in the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. In December 1953, 10 disassembled Chaffees were transported by air to provide fire support to the garrison. They fired about 15,000 shells in the long siege that followed before the Vietnam forces finally overcame the camp in May 1954. France also deployed the M24 in Algeria. Some Chaffees are known to have been passed down to the Army of South Vietnam, where they saw service at least until the Battle of Hue. The last time the M24 is known to have been in action was in the Indo-Pakistani War of 1971, where 66 Pakistani Chaffees stationed in East Pakistan were lost to Indian Army T-55s, PT-76s, and anti-tank teams. Although both Iran and Iraq had M24s prior to the Iran-Iraq War, there is no report of the use in that conflict. South Korean Chaffees saw service in the Korean War, often performing hit-and-run raids on communist forces. Variants and related vehicles. Light Tank T24 prototype was standardized as Light Tank M24. Light Tank T24E1 prototype with Continental R975C4 engine and Spicer torque converter transmission. One vehicle was converted from the original T24 prototype and tested in October 1944. The vehicle had superior performance compared to the M24, but suffered from transmission reliability problems. M19 multiple-gun motor carriage. Developed from T65 40mm GMC length and M24 hull with engine moved to center, twin 40mm Bofors anti-aircraft guns mounted at hull rear. 904 were ordered in August 1944, but only 285 were completed by the end of the war. M37 105mm howitzer motor carriage, developed in 1945, carried a 105mm howitzer M4, was intended to replace the 105mm howitzer motor carriage M7. 448 ordered, 316 delivered, saw service in the Korean War. M41 howitzer motor carriage. Engine moved to the center of hull, 155mm howitzer M1 mounted at rear, 250 ordered, 85 produced. Saw service in the Korean War, with some exported to France. D77 multiple-gun motor carriage. Had 6 50-caliber machine guns mounted in a new design turret. T9, T13 utility vehicles, T22E1, T23E1, T33 cargo carriers, T42, T43 cargo tractors. Based on the T33, the T42 had a torque converter transmission from the M18 Hellcat. The M43 was a lightened version of the T42. T9 had bulldozer kit installed. T6E1 tank recovery vehicle. Additionally, the M38 Wolfhound prototype armored car was experimentally fitted with an M24 turret. Additional equipment: M4 earth-moving tank mounting bulldozer kit for the M24 series. Foreign variants. In 1972, the Norwegian Army decided to retain 54 of the 123 M24 light tanks as reconnaissance vehicles after they were substantially rebuilt under the designation Nanometer 116. It was calculated that the Nanometer 116 rebuilding program cost only about a third as much as contemporary light tanks. This program was managed by the firm Thun Eureka. The American firm NAPCO developed an improved power pack based around the 6V53T diesel engine used in the M113 armored personnel carrier mated to an Allison Mount 653 transmission. The original 75mm gun M6L39 was replaced with a French D925 90mm low-pressure gun, with a coaxial 0.50-inch M2 heavy machine gun. The bow gunner position was eliminated in favor of ammunition stowage. A new fire control system was installed, complete with a Simrad LV3 laser rangefinder. Norwegian firms also converted 8 M24 light tanks into light armored recovery vehicles to support the Nanometer 116. The Nanometer 116 were retired from service in 1993. The Chilean Army upgunned their M24s in the mid-1980s to the IMIOTO 60mm hypervelocity medium support gun, with roughly comparable performance to a standard 90mm gun. Chile operated this version until 1999. Uruguay continues to use the M24, modernized with new engines and 76mm guns which can fire armor-piercing, fin-stabilized, discarding sabot rounds. In mid-1950s, in an attempt to improve the anti-tank performance of the vehicle, some French M24s had the turrets replaced with those of the AMX-13 light tank. AMX-13 variants with Chaffee turret also existed. Operators Austria 46 M24s in active service from 1956 till 1966. Turrets of retired M24 tanks were fixed in Austrian bunker systems. Belgium, Cambodia, Canada-32 purchased by the Canadian government in 1947 along with 294 M4A2EH Shermans. Chile, Denmark, Ethiopia, France, Greece, Iran, Iraq, Italy, Japan entered service in 1952, last ones taken out of service by 1974. Laos, Netherlands 50 entered service after World War II, taken out of service around 1962. Norway 123 entered service in the 1950s, last Chaffees were taken out of service in 1993. Pakistan, Philippines 7 Chaffees assigned to the Recon Company of the 10th BCT, PEFDOK during the Korean War. 2 known were on static display in Lingayen, Pangasinan, Portugal. Republic of China, Republic of Korea 30 Chaffees were used for training in the early 1950s for a short period of time, later delivered to Taiwan. Saudi Arabia, South Vietnam, Spain, used during AFNI War, Thailand, Turkey, United Kingdom, United States, Uruguay 17 upgraded, Vietnam,